to hold me down. Gotta do it, because I may not get another chance. I believe it. If I want it, I can have it. I believe it. Done with falling, done with losing, I can do it. I think I'll tell myself again, I can do it. Yeah. And I'm not gonna stop till I win, 'cause it's my time to rise. Hey, it's my time to shine. Oh, it's my time to live. It's my time to live. It's my time to flow. It's my time.
Dominique with Unapologetically. Dominique. Sorry, y'all. We running a little late. It's my fault, but that's okay. So I have my guest in the building. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Please tell me where your name and where you're from.
So my name is Heather Henley, and I am originally from Gary, Indiana.
Oh, Tyron's from Gary. Okay, okay.
So GI's in the house. And so I am a master crisis therapist.
Okay, what's that?
So that is an individual who has just specialized or studied crisis.
Okay.
And so I've been doing crisis therapy for 20 years.
Oh.
Yes.
So is that more of like suicidal? You get a call, or I mean, how does that kind of work? If you can elaborate a little bit.
So I can get calls. It just depends. A lot of my clients have tons of behavior. So it might be self-injurious behaviors. It might be physical aggression. It might be suicide ideations, homicide ideations. The list can go to property destruction, verbal aggression. I work on social skills, sexual issues, sexual problems, or sexually maladaptive behaviors. So just a little bit of everything.
Okay. So, different things that you do, like, so is it just people call, or do you go out, or?
So I go out to visit them in the homes.
Okay.
Yes. And so it just depends on the clients that I have, based on referrals that comes in through the state.
Nice. So, oh my goodness, I've never heard that before.
Yes. Well, there are they're called behavioral specialists or behavioral consulting.
Okay.
So it just depends. But this group of professionals, we work with individuals whose IQs are below 60.
Okay.
So they would have special needs. And our clients technically could be in a institution. However, the institutions here in the state of Indiana, the majority of them have closed down. We have a couple. So we have Richmond State Hospital, but they're full. We do have Logansport, but they're full. And typically when our clients need some type of immediate care, they may go to Valley Vista or maybe Community
North.
Yes, behavioral unit, Eskenazi. So we do have different facilities that are out there that are to work with our clients who may need some extra supports.
I used to do that. Well, not what you do, but I used to work in the home. So I used to work
nice.
That's how we used it. I was like, okay. They just maybe have different titles for it. But yes, I used to do that.
Absolutely.
I used to do that. So
definitely.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So that's what I do. I've been doing it for a long time, 20 years.
Nice.
So, and because I specialize in working with individuals with crisis, so typically any type of traumatic experience is going to be considered a crisis.
Okay.
And so my agency has contracts with the Department of Child Services. So we provide services to families who are in need. And typically they're in crisis.
So something has happened.
Yes.
Okay. Something
major has happened.
So,
definitely.
So I heard you wrote a book.
I did write a book.
I heard you write a book. So what's
I
up with
did.
The book?
So my book is called I Am an Orange Uncompromisingly. And so what I do is I use the analogy of an orange because an orange has endured quite a bit, and it can endure quite a bit. So I use the characteristics of an orange to talk about the characteristics of individuals and just how the different things that we endure in life, we can compare those to actually the life of an orange.
Okay.
And so that's what the book about, just allowing you to use your past adversities, past traumas that you might have experienced, and allowing that to push you into destiny. So the things that you endure, it's a process for purpose.
Okay.
For the most part.
Okay.
So that's what the book is talking about.
So is this book on your personal?
It is a combination. It is my
Okay.
personal life. I use a lot of clinical techniques in terms of trying to bring your junk to the surface, which is my motto. Because I'm so crisis driven, when I did my intern in Los Angeles, California on Skid Row, we did something called short-term dynamic therapy. I was trained through UCLA and Pepperdine psychologists while I was there. And they use short-term dynamic therapy, which you would have to kind of think of an emergency room for psychiatric. Okay. So if you think about an emergency room, when individuals come in emergencies, different things that are going on, they go to the emergency room, right? Okay. Same rules would apply. And so in Los Angeles, California, they have a ordinance which allows them to be homeless. And so a lot of them are coming from prison, they're homeless, and it's a lot of psychiatric mental illness there. And so what happens is the short-term dynamic therapy, you are given 1 session to 6 to be able to de-escalate the crisis. So you have to, because you may not ever see them again. So that's
a short amount of time.
It's a short amount of time
to get a lot done.
And you
so is it very so it's intense. Okay.
It's extremely intense.
Okay.
So you might only have 1 time to see them because they're homeless. They may come in off the street. They may have tried to kill themselves. It could just be a whole lot of things going on. And so you have to be able to de-escalate, find out what the problem is, and try to, because you may not never see them again. But the goal is that they at least get stabilized to move to the next place.
So how do you unwind from all that?
Well,
and go home?
So I probably don't unwind, which is my concern. My problem.
A big concern. Okay.
Because when you are doing crisis, you are you're processing, number one, all the time, and you are always in a mode of fight. A lot of times when we're talking about crisis or even psychology period, we have this fight or flight mode. Okay. And so it produces hormones in your body, which is some of those corticoid steroids that we produce. Okay, so I'm in fight or flight all the time. Just like someone that might be in trauma. So
your adrenaline is up
it's
all
the time because everything is always a crisis. So I am, because I've been doing it for so long, anytime a situation arrives, I'm automatically, okay, how can I problem solve? What's the replacement behavior? What can I do differently? How can I change the situation?
How does that not drive you crazy? And you are married.
I am.
And you have kids.
I do.
How does that not drive you completely insane? And them in return? Well,
so they're used to it now. It definitely can be a struggle, because I bring my work home. When you are 24-hour crisis, which means that they call you all the time. That's the purpose of the position. You're 24 hours. So if they call you at 2:00 in the morning and you can catch your phone, you're answering, hi, this is Heather. What can I do? What's the problem? So
your phone rings 24
yes
hours.
And actually this past Friday, my phone broke. Yes. It completely froze and shut down to the point where it would not come back on. So I just got a new phone on Monday afternoon.
So that was the only vacation. Seems like that's the only vacation.
Yes.
Okay.
It is hard sometimes to, take vacations, but I'm working on it. I just turned 46.
Okay.
I don't look past 28 though.
Okay.
But I just turned 46. So I'm definitely working on doing some relaxation and some rest time for me, and just trying to change how I do things, because I am like what you see, I'm at 100 all day long. Even when I go to bed, I'm at 100.
How do you sleep?
Well, Sometimes I have to take some medication to help me to kind of have my mind go off.
Okay.
Because I'm always processing and I'm always trying to figure out what's the next step, what's the next thing, what can I do to make the situation better. So I'm always processing.
Wow. So I know I was scoping you out a little bit.
Oh,
And I see that you're a domestic violence.
I am. I
Okay.
am. So, and I kind of talk about that in my book too.
Okay.
Definitely. I was in a 10 or 11-year relationship with my daughter's father, actually. And so I was in college, got pregnant. So, this is the second baby with no father. So, you try to make it work. You're like, oh my God, I got to make it work.
It has to work.
It got to work. And so, you keep secrets. And then, me being my personality is so dominant, so strong, of course, everybody's like, are you kidding me? Like, how do you go through that? So it causes you sometimes to feel embarrassed or shameful, but it happens. And, just thinking back, some of my friends that know the two of us, the telltale signs were there. You say, it won't happen to me. He'll never do that to me until he does it. You just have to make him mad enough, or a traumatic experience has to happen for him, or her, for you to
see that other side.
Yes, for it to be exhibited. And I tell individuals all the time, when you're in relationships and when you're dating, the relationship is not final until you see them mad. You need to know how they respond when they are frustrated, when they're upset, when things are not going well for them. Do they shut down? Do they, self-isolate? Do they go and drink, smoke? Are they out, having risky behaviors? You want to know, how do they respond when frustrated? That is big. And so typically what you see is kind of what you get, unless, they find some other way to get help, which would be some deliverance. Deliverance is important. But yeah, so I and my kids as well. It was pretty traumatic. Because when it was time for me to go and do my intern, I left my children with him. So, sometimes they don't just, verbally and physically abuse the mother, but sometimes we don't look at things appropriately at times.
So how long did you stay in that relationship?
I was with him probably 10 years. And, sometimes I sit back and be like, Heather, what were you thinking about? If I was to give an example, I was thinking about one of my friends the other day, because in my field of what I do, I work with domestic violence. Domestic violence is big for me, and I actually want a shelter, because we sometimes feel that we need to stay, and we keep secrets because, I could never tell my father because he would kill him, right? Okay, so, you never can tell anybody until you're probably done, and then you're still kind of embarrassed. Yes, but, he used to go, because he had his own issues or whatever he was dealing with, he would like tear up my whole apartment like a Tasmanian devil. And I never really kind of processed it. I would just be like, oh my God, he's just having such a hard time. Why? Because I'm a helper. I'm a server. It's natural for me to always want to help because I'm a therapist, that I want to help. How can I fix it? I want to fix the problem. I think I can fix him. I think I can make it work. I think I can make it happen for him. That just was not the case. It just wasn't. And so, but I stayed because I thought I could fix it, because that's what I do. I fix everything. And for me, it was like a failure. So it's all in how you look at things. For me, I had never given up on anything. I got pregnant at 20 and I was like, I refuse to go back to Gary, Indiana. It's not going down. So I stayed at school. I did whatever I had to do to get my first degree in 1998, but I graduated in 91. So for me, it was like a failure. I've not failed at anything. I just kept pushing hard. I was so resilient. And, you know, it takes you to places where you don't want to go sometimes. You know, there was plenty of times where I felt that I just didn't want to live anymore. So along with all of that, you know, that you endure, that you take on, you know, because you are trying to be so strong, because, you know, we're built to be strong. African-American women, we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be able to handle it and do everything that we know to do.
Failure's not an option.
It is so not an option. And so for me, it was a failure. Why? Because this was my second child out of wedlock. So
you just had to.
I felt that I had to endure it.
Okay.
You know, and then I got to that point because I already was depressed and, you know, low. You know, when individuals, even though in your mind you think it, but when they tell you that, you know, you're not anything, nobody's going to want you, you know,
start believing it.
You believe it. I had 2 kids. My weight was up and down all over the place. Sometimes I thought I was pretty. The other times I didn't think I was pretty. You know, and so you just settle and you just be in a broken place because everything is broken, you know. And so you're in your mind, you're just like, I can handle it. I'll just take what I got, because I didn't think anything was going to be better at the time, you know, than what I had.
Thought that was...
Yes, I thought that this is what it is. We're going to work with it, and we're going to keep it pushing, because that was always my motto. We're going to keep it pushing.
So can I ask, did you have dad issues?
So
how was your relationship with your dad?
Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm a daddy's girl.
Okay.
However, because my dad experienced trauma as a child, it was hard. Even though he was there, I never heard him tell me he loved me until I was a grown woman. Because his way of showing love was by going to work and putting food on the table and not leaving my mother and staying there and taking care of us. And so that was his way of showing love, but I didn't realize that. And he worked all the time. So he was present, but he wasn't present.
Okay.
You know, so he was there, but he wasn't. I think, you know, I sang because I love to sing.
Okay.
I think he came to one performance ever in my whole entire life.
Wow.
One. I ran track. I never saw him at a track meet. I never saw him at any type of kind of activities. Wow. Because he worked all the time.
Well, we have a caller, and my mama is not going to call on the regular number like she is supposed to, Kim Kent. You are supposed to call on the regular number if you want to give your 2 cents, ma'am. But go ahead, you on. This is my mama, y'all.
I'm so happy at what she just said. It's so much more being a father than paying the bills. My father, I love him to pieces, and we have a wonderful relationship now. But growing up, I missed that father and daughter relationship. My father would tell us, you should automatically know that I love you. I go to work every day. I provide for you guys, and this, that, the other. But as a child, it's so important to hear parents actually voice it, that I love you, I'm proud of you, even when children make their parents mad.
Absolutely.
We still have to be able to give that affirmation that I love you, I'm proud of you, I'm in your corner, and that kind of thing. So thank you for saying that, because there's so much more to being a father than just being in the house under the same roof.
Absolutely. And you know, the
all right, Mom, keep watching.
The one thing that I definitely want to say, you know, when we are just talking about mothers or fathers, if we're going to be transparent, you know, because my father didn't have a father, I can't expect him to love me how God says that I'm supposed to be loved if he really doesn't know. So in his mind, his way of showing the love, which he did, was by giving and giving us, making sure we had the things that we need, and making sure we had a roof over our head. And, I can remember my sister, we were up the street playing one day and she fell and my dad came up the street with a gun. He was going to hurt the person that hurt us. So he showed the love the best way that he could. But as a female, I still needed a different type of love. I still needed to hear it, even though he was showing it to me the best way that he knew how.
I had to, I talk about it a lot on the show. I had to go through this year. I had to forgive my dad, and y'all, that had to be the toughest because I didn't get an apology. I didn't get none of that. And that had to be the toughest thing to deal with and go through.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff was still going on. So he was still doing things, different things, So
Mm-hmm.
it was just like, how am I supposed to forgive this person? Like, and he's still kind of pushing my buttons. Like he's testing my gangster. He's still pushing my buttons.
Yeah.
But, I had to learn, just different things. And I did a show about forgiveness and forgiving my dad. And I talked to some of my aunts and uncles because I really wanted to understand my grandfather because I've heard different things about him. And from what I heard, he was a good guy. I heard he was a very good guy. He had his faults and he had issues, but he was, he was very, he had this big personality. He was very smart. He was educated, but I heard that he liked to drink. I heard that he wasn't as loving or as just different things involving how my dad maybe grew up and that he maybe needed more. And that kind of helped me a little bit because I had to look in the mirror and I had to see Dominique being broken. But I also had to see my dad and that being that scared little boy who just never grew up. And that kind of helped me. It didn't get it all done, I'll tell you that, but it kind of helped me with dealing with my dad and seeing him as that hurt boy that was very angry. And, there was domestic violence issues in my household with my mother and my father. And it went on with my grandparents. But from what I heard with my grandfather, he liked to lay hands. That's what I say. He liked to lay hands. But from what I heard, my grandma didn't take no laying of the hands. My grandma didn't go out without fight. Right. So I heard that Skillet was not having that. That's what we got. My grandma was Skillet. Skillet wasn't having that. So I had to look at different relationships. That's why I asked. I had to look at different relationships in my life. And I've never been hit before, but it seems like I've dated some guys that are just like my father. They
absolutely
mimic my dad.
Because you come from like that. So when you're thinking about just relationships or any type of nurturement, the environment that you come from is what you see. So although you say, oh my God, I don't want anybody, I want them to have some of the characteristics, but not all, but your father's your first love. He's actually really your first love. And so everything that you see comes through that little scope. So if what you are feeling or seeing, or what you are being given from the parent, which I talk about that in my book, that's my first chapter, in trust. That is the person who you give the power and authority to, because that's what interest means, to give somebody power, authority over. And so your parents is the first individuals who you trust, who you give everything to. They deposit in you. You begin to be made and molded and sculpted from the scope that you see them. And so although you say, oh God, I'm not going to get anybody that's remotely like my father, not so, because it's familiar. So you're going to be attracted to what you are used to until you become whole. That's where that whole forgiveness comes in. So then when you become whole, how you looked at things is going to change because the perception is going to be different.
Yeah. And, in forgiving my dad, I had to look at some of the things with Dominique. And I had to really understand, first of all, I don't have it all. I can't expect my dad to be perfect, and I'm not, So I had to really understand. I had to look in the mirror at Dominique. And it didn't make an excuse for some of the stuff that happened.
Absolutely.
There was no excuse for some stuff that happened when I was a kid or, even in the adult life, whatever has happened, it doesn't make an excuse for it, but it did help me better understand my father and get some sort of compassion for him. Just
Yes.
just a little bit of compassion for him. So, which I did not have. I had no compassion for him. My dad has real bad heart issues,
Mhm.
and his heart stopped on him, and they had to shock him.
Okay.
And since he wasn't married, I was supposed to be at the hospital because I'm supposed to make the decision because they weren't. I don't even think they were going to be able to do surgery on him.
Okay.
It was very serious, and I didn't go to the hospital. It was so bad. My mom, his ex-wife, went, and I didn't go.
Okay.
And I was very. At that point, I knew I was very angry. I was still very upset, and to have a decision like that and I not even show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really do a lot of soul searching in Dominique, and it was I'm more like David than what I like to admit.
Yeah.
I'm more like my father than what I like to admit, from my
Mm-hmm.
temper. And it's not as bad as what it used to be, but from my temper on to, like I said, some of the men I've dated are a lot like my father. So in this whole forgiveness thing, I had to start thinking, and I had to start really changing my mind, because when you change your mind, you can change your life by changing the way you think about things.
Absolutely.
I'm a firm believer in that. So I had to really start looking at my life and where I'm at, and I had to start changing the way I think about a lot of things. Yeah, he cute. Yeah, he get mad, and yeah, he like to. Okay, no, that's not gonna work no more. It's no.
Right.
So I really had to come to those terms as far as in my journey. So that's why I thought I'd ask about your dad, because I know with me, my dad was a big part in a lot of what I went through this year.
Okay.
He was a big part in, a lot of the issues and just a lot of things I went
Mhm.
through. So that's why I thought I'd ask for you.
Okay. And it's not a problem. The one thing that I love is that, the things that we endure, it is a process for healing. So even though you had experienced that with your dad, that was your breaking moment to start your process so that you can be different, so that you can look at things differently, so that you can change your perception. Because you have to be able to recognize and understand that he didn't just wake up like that. He was a child, he was a child too. That's not making an excuse for him, because he needs to be able to own and take accountability for his part when he became an adult, when you became aware, when you were old enough to understand, that you've offended me, you've done something wrong. You have to be able to make different choices. So once we are alert and we are understanding, then that's when we have the obligation to come back and make some different choices and different changes. And so I love it that your mom said that her relationship is really good now, because my dad is the bomb. Even with everything that he's experienced and the things that he's went through, he's the coolest dad on the planet. And I know that if I ever, even at 46, needed anything, that he got me, because that was what he definitely knew that he could provide for us, is the stability and the stabilization that he could bring, because he may not have had that.
So I know we were talking about parents, and I know you are a parent.
I am.
And I know you said that your children, they were, abused. How did you guys work through all that? How did that work?
Because as parents, I don't care how many books they write, it's still not good enough. It's just not good enough. And culturally, we all, have different stories. And so what I had to do, because what I realized is that my children were broken, and they really were broken. And so I had to go to them and apologize for my behavior, for me thinking that what I was doing was correct, but the choices that I made indirectly affected them.
Yeah.
They directly affected me, but they indirectly affected my children. If I was to use my son, for example, just how he sees love, and, because of just things that had happened to me, he didn't even think I loved him, because I'd never told him. I couldn't hardly touch on him that much, and so his processing and his thought process of love was so skewed. It was just a complete distortion, of love. And even at the age he is now, he's 25, he still, struggles in terms of the affection and needing the affection because his father is not there and he wasn't there. So I raised him as a single mother. And so because I was there and pursuing school, because failure was not an option. So I was a single mom. I went to school, trying to make sure that I could provide him everything that he needed. I still didn't give him the love that he really needed. So again, I'm doing the same thing that my father did, right? I just didn't realize it because in my mind was like, hey, I'm here too, but I still love on him because I told him I loved him, right? But I didn't show him the way that he needed to be shown the love, because we all have different personality temperaments. And so how you perceive love is different from how I perceive it. So I was giving him the love that I thought that he was supposed to have, but it just wasn't the right type of love. And so at one point, he thought I didn't love him. And I was like, I tell you, I love you all the time. What are you talking about? But he didn't feel it. It's a different for me to say it than you to feel it. Some people be like, well, I bought you. Look, I came to every game. I didn't miss school. I was a parent chaperone, right? See, that's the stuff that didn't happen for me, but that's not what he needed. I gave him what I needed, the stuff that I thought would be good for him, right? So I never missed every time the school needed a parent chaperone, I was there. I never missed anything that the school had.
Well, so we have a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the question is, how does one manage emotional pain?
Good question. So in order for an individual to manage emotional pain, they need to be able to actually deal with that particular emotion, whatever the particular situation is at the time. Because when we're talking about emotions, typically we don't deal with them. We just, kind of brush it under the rug a little bit. So let's say, for example, let me give the example of, I was supposed to attend, let's say I was supposed to attend my daughter's, and this happened plenty of times. I was supposed to attend my daughter's, she went to North Central, she plays the cello. And she had this really, really big orchestra concert. And I promised her I was going to go, as I've done before, and didn't show up because I was working, right? At which my kids thought that my job and the clients that I serviced was more important than them, right? So I didn't show up, even though I said I was going to show up, and I promised, because mommies never break promises. So I promised her I was going to show up, and I did not show up. And so instead of me coming to her to acknowledge that number one, she was disappointed, she was upset that yet again I told her I was coming and I didn't come. What I did was like, you'll be okay. I'll go to the next one. It's just an orchestra.
Kind of downplaying it
yes, I
bit.
downplayed the whole thing. So what happens is then she had rejection on top of rejection, just on top of rejection, because that's what it is. She's feeling rejected and abandoned. And then something so small happened and she just completely lost it, like complete breakdown. And I'm looking like, okay, Pumpkin, what's going on with you? Like, I mean, hey, what's the problem? Why you tripping? Right? That's where I'm at. Why? Because we never dealt with the real emotion. So now we're in let's say we're in 5 years now, because she's in college. Mm-hmm. And after we've had a massive breakdown over something small like senior assassination. Let's talk about senior assassination. We have a complete breakdown where she's crying, manic all over the place. And I'm trying to get an understanding of what the problem is. But the real issue was that, Mom, I have asked you on several occasions to show up and you haven't. So when we're talking about emotional healing, we're talking about dealing with what the real issue is, because a lot of times we allow issues to build up on top of each other, and then it's almost like a volcano. If a small pebble hit it, it explodes. And you're sitting there saying, sir, ma'am, what are you doing? I'm confused.
How did we get here?
What are you talking about? But the real issue was that I have abandoned and rejected you for the past 5 years. And we've never dealt with it. We've never talked about it. We've just piled things on top of it, and more things on top of it, and more things on top of it. So when you're talking about emotional healing, you have to be able to deal with the situation at hand at that moment. I hope that answered the question.
Well, I don't think my mom understood how really, I mean, I think mothers know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think my mother really knew how broken I really was until we were talking about I was dating this guy or whatever, and I said, well, I mean, ain't no point in getting serious with him. He's not gonna stay around anyways. And my mom said, what did you say? And I said it again, and at that point she seen how deep and I actually explained to her why I felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point was when she seen how deep my abandonment issues ran, when it dealt with men, and when it dealt with my father, and when it dealt with just people in general. She seen how deep those abandonment issues ran. And, that was a tough conversation to have. And I don't really think she really understood until that point of me saying that, how really broken or how really hurt or how I really felt about my dad. She knew that there were issues, mothers know. She knew there were issues, or I felt some type of way or whatever. But just because I didn't communicate it or whatever with her, it was until that comment came that she was like, okay, you really need some help.
Right.
You really need some help, and more help than what I can give you. So that I kind of get what you're saying on that.
Absolutely. We're trying to save the world, but sometimes we forget about the world that's at home. It happens.
That is very
all
true.
the time.
That's very true.
How do you deal with fear suffered as a child that have manifested as an adult?
So that's a good question. So in order to deal with fear that you suffered as a child that continues to manifest, we're going to talk about it and be transparent, that continues to manifest, you have to go back to infancy. You have to go back to the place where the fear first entered in. And you have to be able to deal with that. And so then once you deal with that, once you process that, once you look at that in the mirror, and you begin to tell it that it clearly has no control over you. Why? Because fear is a secret. The only way that something can paralyze you if it's a secret, if it's hidden. So when you actually begin to talk about the fear, then at that point, it no longer has that control or that power over you, because you're dealing with it at that point. And so then as you begin to continue to matriculate in age, then the fear can kind of begin to subside, because it's right here in front of you. Fear is usually hidden, right?
Okay.
Fear is always hidden. It's in the dark, but when you actually can bring it to the light and you talk about it, it then no longer has control over you.
It no longer has that power.
It has no power at that point. And that's why it's fear. And I talk about it in my book too, so which goes back to why my son felt that I didn't love him. I couldn't touch him. So, when I got sexually assaulted, I'm going to say, when I was 7. So one of my friends' fathers, put his hands in my pants, some things that he shouldn't have did to a 7-year-old, let's say that. And so there was a whole lot of issues going on. Number one, I snuck. I wasn't supposed to be up the street, I was supposed to be on the porch, but I snuck up the street to my friend's house because I wanted to see if she can come out and then come down the street. So you know how you do, you're 7. So I ran up the street real quick.
And you come outside.
Yes. And now, you want to, because I, want to knock on the door and be like, hey, can you come outside? And then if you come outside, I want you to come down the street. Okay. So her stepdad tells me to go. He was like, oh, you can come in. She's downstairs. Duh. Now, you know that your mama and your daddy, you know your daddy crazy. He had already told you not to go in nobody's house. So I did it anyway. I'll go downstairs in the basement, 7, you're not thinking. And he has me hemmed up against a little corner. And so as he has his hands in my pants and he is doing things with his fingers to my vagina area, I'm, petrified. And of course I call on Jesus, because that's the only thing that I knew, because I went to church all the time. And so anyway, he let me leave out the house and go. And so that changed my whole demo. And I was scared of everything at this point. Not to mention that I felt that because I was disobedient, like if you're disobedient, you're going to be punished. So I felt like I was punished because I snuck up the street. And clearly I couldn't tell my dad, my mom, because they was going to whoop me. Because, hey, we got whoopings. And so that's what I knew. I was like, oh, I ain't getting a whooping. Not today. I shouldn't have been up the street. And, oh my God, look at what he did to me. And so then I was like, then I'm going to get him in trouble. And so, you think all of these are thinking errors. So I had all of that going on. I dealt with all of that, never told a soul ever. And then I had a child. And so I was scared to touch him, clean him, wash him, because I thought if I even touched his penis, that I was touching him wrong, that I was inappropriate. Oh, it was all crazy. And this is what I was dealing with. So I couldn't touch him. I would tell him I love him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would, put his clothes on. I would just do all that, but it was difficult. Like my thoughts that were going on in my mind, even growing up, like, oh my God, would I like my son? I just was terrified, and I never told anybody, and I never liked to be touched. And I was mean. I didn't like people. Don't touch me. College was the worst. I mean, I was mean. I was violent. I was kicked out of elementary. I was kicked out of Holy Angels, which was like a Catholic school, because somebody said something to me. I just took my belt buckle off and busted her in her mouth. I was mean. And I was like, you'll never be able to touch me, and that was my guard. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, I can't be violated again. Like, are you kidding me? And so that was what I grew up with, just don't like a whole lot of people, didn't like to be touched. And so when I went to Purdue, that all changed, because there was a woman at the church that I was going to. When I say she would hug me every day, to the point where I would just be like shaking, like a board. Like she would just, when I go to church, she would hug me and I'd be like, I don't like to be touched. Like, I don't like to be touched. Or like I would go to church, leave church, and hurry up and leave before church even got out. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't want to have to interact. No, I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want to interact. And so I just remember this one day, she hugged me, and all I know is I screamed. And I felt like my body was melting like butter. Like when you put butter in a skillet, and I just fell to the ground, screaming and hollering to the top of my lungs, like somebody was doing something to me. You were screaming for that little girl. I was screaming for the 7-year-old little girl. And when I say I screamed, oh my God, I screamed and screamed and screamed. And so when I got up, I just wasn't even the same person. And at that point, I felt relief, but I still was so broken that I didn't even know what to do. You know what I'm saying? And so I found myself sometimes sitting in Walmart's parking lot, 2 a.m, and my kids were at home, and I was going to leave. And people were just talking me off the ledge because I just couldn't handle a whole lot of things. I remember calling my parents like, you better come get him, because this is not for me. I don't know what you're going to do. And because I'm leaving, like having to be talked off the ledge so many times, but I'm grateful to God that he saw fit to deliver me, and that people were able to pour into me so that I could change, you know, how I looked at things, and so that I could have forgiveness and healing. And, you know, when my mind came back to, I was just like, oh my God, if he did that to me, what was he doing to my friend? See, as an adult, I can say that now, like, oh my Jesus, if he did that to me, what in the world was he doing to my friend?
Or anybody else that came
Or
over,
anybody
nieces,
else. You know, because so many times we are taught that everything is a secret anyway. You know, it's a secret. It's a secret. You know, we keep so many secrets, but that's why we so bound, because we have so many secrets. And so then we're walking around in fear. That's all we're walking around in, is fear.
What happens in the house stays.
Yeah, and so you're terrified, you're scared, you know, but we have to not be afraid, you know. And so, hey, I could talk about it now, because why? I'm free. And, you know, I can definitely express to other women and ladies to know that it is okay, you know, that it happens, you know what I'm saying? But it doesn't have to continue to change who you are. You know what I'm saying? If you're willing to look at things differently. And so just at that moment, I think because I was so broken, and I used to pray, Lord, I'm scared to kill myself. If you would just kill me, we'll be good. And that used to be a prayer that I prayed, because I just didn't want to be here, but I was scared to kill myself, because I was like, if I kill myself, you know, in church you taught, if you kill yourself, you can't go to hell, right? You're going to hell. So I was like, how about, hey, if you kill me or somebody else. So I was doing risky stuff, just stupid stuff, because I didn't want to be here, you know? So you do things, you know, because you be like, I don't want to be here, you know? And so I actually began to find my purpose, you know? And so even now, like the church that I go to, our apostle, he always says that, you know, the reason why you still here is because you have purpose. And that really hits me, because there was a time where I did not want to be here, you know, because I didn't think I had purpose. You know, I don't even know why I'm here. Everything is crazy. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I could barely touch my son. I feel like if I touch him, I'm going to like him, or I'm going to touch him inappropriate. Going to know that you know what I'm saying? Like, I just didn't know what was going on, you know? So you have those moments and feelings. And so I can definitely say it, you know, I can definitely, you know, say, I love my son, and I don't, I mean, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't love on him, but that was what the enemy wanted to do. He put that fear in. And so when I was able to go back and deal with it, then my life began to change. You know what I'm saying? And that's when deliverance began to take place, you know, and then I had to deal with everything that was attached to it, everything that came along with it, you know, because along the way, I just didn't like people. And so I had to be like, Lord, can I love the people, please? You know, I like the clients better than I like the people, you know? And so I had to ask God to help me. You know, I didn't smile. I never smiled. And I smile now. I never used to smile. If you ask friends who I went to college with, undergrad, they would be like, "Who? She's so mean. You just had to get to know her." And my thing was, you know, you don't have to like me. I don't care, because I probably don't like you. And then I would tell you that I don't like you, and then tell you everything about you. You know what I'm saying? But
sound like me.
God had to deal with me. You know what I'm saying? He had to deal with just all of those things. And he had to deal with the rage that I had just from the whole situation, on top of the generational stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, my father was present, but he wasn't present. But if I even begin to tell the story about my grandmother or my grandfather, or even, you know, the anger that they experienced and the things that they did, I mean, it's in me. So I need to have some forgiveness before I kill somebody. And that's just kind of where I was, because I was clear on, you know, plotting to end lives. I was, because that's where I was. I just wasn't the nicest person. And in my mind, you will never get a chance to hurt me first.
Wow. Well, we are going to take a brief break. We will
Okay.
be right back. Give us about 10 minutes to be right back.
And my best days are still in front of me. Everything will be alright. 'Cause now it's time for me. It's my time to rise. It's my time to shine. It's my time to live. It's my time to live. It's my time.
With Unapologetically Dominique. And I have Mrs. Heather Henley in the building.
Yes, I'll be a doctor May 10th,
Oh,
2019.
nice. Okay.
Come
We'll
on now.
graduate. Okay. So we had two questions before we went to commercial. Nevaeh, questions left?
Question is identity, misperception.
So how do you deal with self-identity and
Misperception.
misperception?
That was one question.
Okay, so self-identity. Well, I would say that, first of all, you have to be able to recognize and understand who you are
Okay.
when we're talking about your self-identity. And because we find ourselves living out dreams of others, it is hard to identify with who you are and kind of what your purpose is. I have examples for everything. I sit and think about when I was a little girl, and because I like to sing, I always want to play the keys. I want to play the piano.
Okay.
And so I remember my mother saying, nope, you won't be playing the piano, but you can play the strings. So I played the viola, and I played it for 10 years. And then my mom was she did paralegal work. So she worked for an attorney. And so, based on the life that I saw, I was like, ooh, I want to be an attorney. Right. So I go to school saying I want to be an attorney. Played the viola. I hated it. Stopped after 10 years because I wanted to play the piano because I like to sing, and I wanted to sing and play the piano. And she was like, oh, we're not doing that whole singer thing. That's not going to be your goal or your focus to be a singer. Like, you're going to get a real job, So when we're talking about a self-identity, because so many people help to mold us, it makes it difficult for us to even recognize and understand like who we are and what our purpose is. And so when we are trying to find ourselves or find ourself to identify with, like, what do I identify with? That's when we kind of sit back and figure out who we are in terms of the things that we like to do, our worth, our esteem, all of those come into play. And that happens the more and more we experience life. Because like I said, starting out, I wanted to do the things that my mother wanted me to do. Okay, but then after I got my bachelor's degree in political science, I hated it. And I realized that that's not my identity. That's not a part of who I am. I don't even love it. I love what I do right now. I'm identifying with myself. Everything that I've had to endure, even from a little girl to now, I am 46 and I can identify with who I am and who God called me to be. And so I'm called to be a deliverer. I'm called to be somebody who is here to help to free people. I made the comment when we were off, get free and be free. That's what that's my self-identity. That was what I was created to do. And so when we're talking about recognizing or finding our self-identity, it is about a journey that we are walking on, because you start off identifying with somebody else.
Okay.
You identify with your parents. You identify with their dreams, and then they live through you. Have you talked to the parents who live through you? Or even the statement that I made, raising my kids. I've raised my kids how my parents raised me and what they didn't do to raise me. So when we're just talking about self-identity, it is about making those things, those teachable moments, begin to allow you to understand who you are.
Okay. Is there another question? I know there was maybe one more I want to say.
And so I hope I answered that.
We
How
fired.
would you recommend someone support another in their healing process?
Okay, so in order for an individual to support someone, in their healing process, you have to have some care and concern. It is so important. Dominique definitely mentioned, even if I was to use her as an example, she mentioned the fact that her father didn't do everything that she wanted him to do. He didn't do everything right. But in order for her to even start her healing, she had to understand and recognize at least who he was in order for her healing to start. So when we're talking about supporting someone in the healing, we have to be able to allow them to get to that place to recognize who they are so that the healing can start.
And can I add something to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Something that kind of helped me. I also needed people around me that weren't just my yes men.
Yes.
I need some people around me that was going to hold me accountable, even though I was going through. And yeah, you do need people. Sometimes you do need some loving on, but sometimes you just need, you foul,
Right.
you
Absolutely.
foul, and you wrong, and that's what a real friend does. That's what somebody that really cares for you does. So
Absolutely.
that accountability thing is big, but I mean, it shouldn't always just be okay, this and this and that. You should still be loving on that person. If you genuinely care for them, you should be loving on them. But in loving on them, don't enable them.
Absolutely.
Don't enable them. So in the loving on them and, wanting them to be better, don't push them too hard, because it is a journey. It is a journey, and it does take time. So it is a journey. So in loving on them and pushing, you use your discretion with that, especially for somebody that truly loves and cares for you, and and if you love and care for them, use your discretion.
And you have to have some patience, because when we're talking about healing, if you were to think about a wound, if I was to use, because I love analogies. So if we were to think about a wound, if you think about when you were a little kid and you fell and you got that scar, the first initial thing that you see is the blood, right? So you see all the bleeding. Okay, so then after the bleeding, after it, begins, the air hits it and it starts trying to heal, it gets that little ugly scab on the top of it, right? And so then every time something hit it,
the scab
comes off. Right? The scab comes off. But you know that it's still life under there because it's pink. It ain't dead. Which means it hurts. So when we're talking about healing, it's a process. Sometimes scars take a year, 2 years to heal, because they not only heal on the outside, they have to heal on the inside too. So you have to care for it. You have to nurture it. You have to put a little medicine on it. You got to blow on it sometimes. Sometimes every time you got to cover it. And so when we're talking about an individual supporting somebody that's healing, you have to be all of that. You have to cover it sometimes. You have to also put a little alcohol on it because it needs to burn it to clean out the infection,
itself,
right? Yes. And when you're healing, it hurts. It hurts. So you have to be the person that can be there to be able to help them through the process of healing. Because healing is not quick. It's not. Healing is just not quick. And some healing takes a couple years. I had a hysterectomy in 2012. And so they told me that I would not totally be healed internally for 5 years from all the scars and some of the scars on the inside would actually cause issues with some of the other organs on the inside. So let's talk about it. So when you talk about a person trying to get healed, you know, they have to really go through a process. And if you're going to be there to support them, you have to understand that the healing is not a quick work and that it's going to take a little bit of time. And you just have to remember, as long as it hurts a little bit, as long as some pink under there, as long as the skin is still trying to grow back, the color is still trying to come back, that it's working.
It's working.
Now, when healing doesn't take place, then that's something totally different. That means it's infected. And sometimes, you know, when we don't take care of ourselves in the healing process, it never heals. That's a whole nother subject. Absolutely. So then it becomes difficult to support that. But when you see that something is actually healing, that, you know, that the individual is actually trying, then you definitely want to be a support to that individual. So I hope that answered. I try to give real
so we got
life scenarios.
We got one more question. Then I want to know some stuff about next year.
Okay, great.
How do you forgive yourself?
It's a process.
It is.
It's a process.
It is a process. Because we become our biggest critic.
That's true.
And so we condemn ourselves to hell all day, every day. I even made the statement. We do.
That's true.
I even made the statement, you know, like even with my kids, you know, I was so broken. I was like, oh my God, I'm such a bad mother. And oh my, you know, this is why my kids are going through all of this, because I didn't do everything that I was supposed to do. And if you just would have did what your mother said, why you didn't do what your mother said, Heather? Didn't your mother say not to do that? Because if you would have did it, you wouldn't be crack-brained. And then, because that was her word, she'd be like, you crack brains. If you know what I'm saying, I used to be like, oh God, I'm crack brains. I didn't do what she told me to do, you know. And so you condemn yourself. I'm not good enough. I just said that failure was not an option, but guess what? Failure is an option. It's a teachable moment. The reason why I'm where I'm at right now is because I failed. I failed at so many things. And so when we're talking about forgiveness, forgiveness is me getting up, even though I failed, and still trying to do it again. And the only way I could do that is if I forgive myself, because I felt that I wasn't good enough. So, you know, on a daily basis, we have to always be finding ourselves at a place where we are forgiving ourselves. You know, at one point, I used to have to look in the mirror and say, Heather, you're beautiful. And I would say it until I cried. Because I never felt it. And so I would have to look at myself and say it until I felt that thing. And then I was like, you know, and that's where that forgiveness comes. That's where that self-identity comes. That's when I found out who Heather is. It don't matter what you think, because I know who I am and I know whose I am. That big piece of it, you know, knowing who I am, and that God, he made me in the image, in the likeness of him. And if he made me in the image and likeness of him, oh my goodness, like really, you know what I'm saying? So it's a process that we have to kind of go through every day, because traumas cause us to always feel condemned and defeated, and always feel like we're not good enough. And then our neighbor, the people around us, you know, everything that we see. My hair is not long enough. I'm not light enough. My eyes are a different color. I'm too dark. My teeth are bucked. I wear glasses. Yeah. My body. We're in an identity crisis. We're always trying to figure out who we are. And all that comes from is being able to be okay with who we are, that whole self-forgiveness. And understanding that, hey, I'm okay with how I'm made. Yep, I need to make some changes. Yep, I probably need to not have these chips. I probably need to, not have a cookie or two. Maybe I need to go to the gym. But I'm still okay with who I am. And so that is the important piece when we're talking about forgiveness.
And accepting that you are a work in progress, and you're not going to get it
Absolutely.
Today, and you might not get it tomorrow.
And it's not your fault a lot of times.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's not your fault. And just to say this, and, I do victim therapy. And so a lot of my clients in victim therapy, because one of my specialties is working with kids who would be considered sex offenders. They have sexually maladaptive behaviors. And so when I'm dealing with the victims, the hardest part for them in forgiving themselves is the fact that, because of course we are sexual creatures, right? It don't matter how old you are, it still feels good at the end of the day. And so the hardest part when I'm working with my clients, the victims, is it is hard for them to forgive themselves because it feels good. And so that's just the nature of it. It feels good. But what I have to tell them is we are sexual creatures. So yes, by nature, it is supposed to feel good, but it doesn't feel good when it's your dad. It doesn't feel good when it's your mom. It doesn't take away the natural hormone that comes, that it feels good. Does that make sense? So then it's hard for them to forgive themselves because they're like, oh my God, I can't forgive myself because it felt good. But then it was so you're torn. You're torn. So it's about being able to know that things are not always your fault. That we have to be able to, in some cases, take accountability for things, but not everything is your fault. Even when we're talking about, children and, their parents and the parents that you did not choose, that was chose for you. You know what I'm saying? So that plays a big part when we're just talking about forgiveness and being able to forgive yourself, understanding that, this is you. We didn't choose. I didn't get to choose Mary and Homer. I didn't. God chose them for me. And although he chose them for me, everything that I went through, it was for purpose, and that I still have purpose, no matter what I went through. See, I can say that now because I didn't think I ever had purpose, but I still have purpose. So
I love that. So, lesson that you learned 2018. I need to know the biggest lesson you learned 2018.
So the biggest lesson that I've learned in 2018 is that I am just human, because I love Wonder Woman, everything she stands for.
Okay.
And so I always feel as though I can help everybody and rescue everybody and fix everybody. And I can't fix them. The only person that really can fix them is God. And that in order for a person to want to be free, because, I said be free and get free, they got to want it. They have to want the deliverance. And I had to learn that.
More than what you wanted
for. More than what I wanted. Because a lot of times I wanted it more than they did. I wanted it so bad. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm flipping and jumping and swinging from the chandeliers and all kind of stuff. And they just like, what? And so that was the biggest thing and the hardest. Because then I struggled with trust and cynicism, because I just be like, what? I'm confused. Like, how bad you want this? And so I'm like, okay, Lord, I can do this. I can make it happen, but I can't make it happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to have somebody on the other end with me.
You can only do so much.
Yes, I can't do it by myself. And then, like I said, they have to want it. So that was my biggest lesson in 2018, and then just forgiveness and dealing with my own personal insecurities, because I am a processor. I'm so analytical. I process and process. So I ruminate on things. If you said that you didn't like me or you did something, when I say I ruminate on it, I process that thing till it can't even be processed. I break that thing down so it can forever be broken. And then I'd be like, oh my God, Dominique said that she didn't like me. Okay, but why did she say that last week? And then when we went out, she acted like she liked me. And then I'm being so honest with you. Stop the madness, Heather. You have to take.
It had nothing to do with you.
Sometimes it has nothing to do with us. And guess what? Everybody got their own issues. And we're all dealing with different issues. But what is important, Dominique, is my response. And I have to make sure that I respond better. My response is better. You know what I'm saying? And my response can be better. And, we joke about it because my sister, she works my my nurse, my baby sister. Her name is April. I love her to death. But she stayed on the call block for years. At times, it's inappropriate, Heather. It's not appropriate. I need to be able to respond appropriately and in my mind, because I know that I get frustrated in my anger. Remember, we talked about that whole anger thing.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, so that I don't feel like I'm not in control, I say nothing. I just be like, you're on a call block because I can't even deal with you right now because it might not come out how I want it to come out. And you know what I'm saying? That could change the game. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm just gonna put you on the, I'm gonna block you. And then when I feel like I want to talk to you, I'll talk to you and I'll be rational. But that's still not appropriate. It's not appropriate.
Well, Miss Heather said that, I ain't to that point.
Dominique, it's not.
I will block you.
Dominique,
just know that you can get blocked.
Dominique,
just know that. Camera, I need y'all to know that. Y'all can't get blocked with me.
You can block for a few days where you not respond in emotions. See, that's the difference. I would never want you to respond emotionally, because after you have settled, after you've thought about it, and you've also taken accountability for what you've done, then your response will be a little bit different. You'll have a little bit of mercy. That's all I'm saying.
I ain't there yet, y'all. I'm working on it. I ain't there yet.
I love it. I'm going to help you, Dominique.
So I need everybody to put in their plugs. We're going to start with Tyron. Tyron, I need you to put in your plug real quick.
My show is BZNZ Internet Talk Radio. We'll be back in the new year. Not the first week of January, but it'll be the second week. We're just going to get it started by talking about New Year's resolutions and things like that. I really don't believe in them, but we're going to talk about them.
I'm going to come crash that show. Whether Tyron know it or not, I'm going to come crash that show. You tried me. Don't do me. Don't do me.
I just said that I no longer call block. And I love my baby sister. She is my, she tugs on me in the spirit, but she prays for me silently. And I love it.
Okay.
She tugs on me, but she's a silent little weapon. She all right.
So I'm gonna let you put your plug in. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can definitely I have my book, which is I Am in Orange, Uncompromisingly. It's a great book. You have to be uncompromising in your pursuit to purpose. Remember, I said everybody got a purpose. So definitely you can find my book on Amazon. You can go on my webpage, which is www.heather_henley.com. You can find me on Facebook, and on Facebook it's under Author Heather Henley. On Twitter and Instagram it is Heather_Henley. For Twitter it's #Heather_Henley.
So make sure you guys tune in. We're bringing in the new year with them. We're gonna sit at home, have a few drinks with us, even though you can't be here. We'll have a couple drinks in the studio and we'll have a good time. So tune in tomorrow from 6 to 7:30. And the next show after that, we're gonna be in the new year. So you guys gotta tune in to see what we got planned. So we'll see you tomorrow at Unapologetiaclly. See y'all later.